Hello, everyone at home as well. I'm sorry I'm a couple moments late. Can somebody just unmute or something or turn on your camera and give me a thumbs up so I know that you can hear us?
Hear you.
Excellent. Glad you're here. I'm going to put you all up on the screen here so that everyone can see too what's going on. Yeah, I'll just move you all over there. There we go. Well, I am really glad to have this group here. We've got looks like about 3 computers at home, 4 maybe, and where's my little cursor? There it is. Oops. Go. All right. So first of all, for folks at home, I'm going to go ahead and just mute you for now, just so we don't have any background noise, but you can absolutely unmute when you've got some questions or observations or want to weigh in. And for folks in the room, we've got another 6 or so of us here, 7, I guess, if I'm counting myself. No, it's 7.5. I'm going to count myself as more than, why not? Why not? Because I'm standing. That's correct. So really glad to have you folks all with us. I'm going to turn our view into a gallery, although a lot of the time we're not going to be using the folks at home anyways. Participants. There we go. All right. Well, first and foremost, I want to explain again what it is we're going to be doing together, so that when we do our blessing to get us underway, it has its full weight behind it, all of its potential. This 3-session practicum or workshop is called Ethical Wills, and there was a lot of uncertainty or lack of clarity on what I meant by that. And so along the way, I had to make sure that I was trying to define it for whatever audiences I was in front of, whether it was people at services or just chatting in the atrium along the way. But I want to make sure everyone's clear on what an ethical will is. We could put 3 types of wills out there on the table. The first is kind of what you think of as a last will and testament, perhaps the kind of thing that you distribute your estate amongst whoever's going to receive it. And that's kind of the traditional notion of a will. The second will is a living will. Sometimes it's called an advanced medical directive. And as a still living, thinking human being, it is an opportunity for you to articulate what it is you want done in the case of being unable to articulate your own medical choices. So it's where you say, I would like there to be heroic measures taken to bring me back if my heart stops, or if there's no likelihood of a full recovery, then I don't want CPR performed, or you get the idea. That's a living will. An ethical will is something very different altogether. This is an opportunity for a person to pause in their journey at whatever point they're in and to think, if my story ended today, what have I learned and what would I like to leave behind as my legacy of wisdom? An ethical will, therefore, is the sense of ethic that is that you package up for delivery. Whether or not it actually gets delivered is actually less the point. We'll talk about this more in the second session, but thinking about who's going to receive this will is only a piece of the process. Perhaps the most significant and most important element of this whole exercise is the opportunity for you to go through the exercise itself. Someone asked me earlier today. He said, "Aren't I a little bit young to be thinking about writing an ethical will?" And I said, well, number one, no one knows when their last day is, so don't get too full of yourself. But number two, No, this is something that can be done over again. I just this afternoon in preparation, I read over the ethical will that I wrote for my son last time around, and I loved going back and rereading it. I'm going to write one to my daughter this time, and it's going to be different. It will come out very differently now that I'm a couple years further down the road and have a different way of looking at myself and my own wisdom. So the idea here is that we become ourselves the text. And so here, I guess I'm going to try and share this screen. I'm actually sharing mostly because I want to see if it works. It did. Okay. So folks at home, we're going to do this bracha together. And I want you to be thinking in terms of a blessing over Torah study in which you yourself are the Torah. So when we say today, thanks God who commands us to engage with words of Torah, I want you to think about that almost as a reflexive statement, that we're going to be looking at ways to engage with ourselves as the text, that we're studying ourselves. Does that make sense? Great. So join me in a bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav vitzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. And I'm noticing here that I am forever finding punctuation in the wrong spot because computers just have a really hard time going back and forth between text going right to left and left to right. So that's an English colon in a Hebrew sentence. That's why it's hanging off on the wrong side there. Okay. I'm realizing that I forgot my lesson plan on my table. So you're all going to breathe deeply for 13 seconds while I run back to my study. I'll be back in half a moment. All right, thank you. Thank you. So the first thing that I want to do tonight is to try to put this notion of writing ethical wills in context. And for folks at home, I don't have you up on the screen right now, actually. There. Okay, that's better. If you want to jump in or ask a question or reflect, you'll probably just have to unmute yourselves or raise your hand, and somebody here will say, "Oh, Gail's got her hand up." I want to try to put the notion of ethical wills in a larger context. The sense that this is not something that that some, I don't know, modern person thought, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we package up with the best of our wisdom for our children? This is something that we've been doing for a very, very long time. And so I'm going to give you some examples to think through, some of them ancient, and then a couple of them more modern. And we're just going to look at some examples of how we've seen others do something just like this. Now, folks at home, I emailed out about a half hour ago these texts. I'm going to put them on the screen. If anyone in the room, I have 3 copies. If anyone wants a copy in print, but they're in your inbox as well. So I'm just going to read through a couple of these, and we'll talk a little bit about what they look like. So the first one is a classic, and it's actually all 3 are from the Bible. The first 3 that I'm going to show you, and this one is from Genesis. So this is a classic text in which Jacob is on his deathbed. And remember, he's got a whole boatload of kids and grandkids already. And each one is going to become the chieftain of a tribe. And so one by one, he's calling them over to give them his ethical will, spoken right to them, his sort of last wisdom. So he says, or the Torah says, then Jacob called for his sons and said, gather around. So I can tell you what will happen to you in days to come. Assemble and listen, sons of Jacob. Listen to your father Israel. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, the first sign of my strength, excelling in honor, excelling in power, turbulent as the waters. You will no longer excel, for you went up onto your father's bed, onto my couch, and defiled it. Shimon and Levi are brothers. Their swords are weapons of violence. Let me not enter their council. Let me not join their assembly, for they have killed men in their anger and hamstrung oxen as they pleased. Cursed be their anger, so fierce, and their fury so cruel. I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them in Israel. Judah, your brothers will praise you. Your hand will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down to you. You are a lion's cub, Judah. You return from the prey, my son. Like a lion, he crouches and lies down. Like a lioness, who dares rouse him? The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he to whom it belongs shall come, and the obedience of the nations shall be his. He will tether his donkey to a vine, his colt to the choicest branch. He will wash his garments in wine, his robes in the blood of grapes. His eyes will be darker than wine, his teeth whiter than milk. All right, so the text goes on and goes through the other sons of Jacob, but I want to think for a few moments about the sentiment here. Now, this is a little bit different format. We'll see some other approaches shortly, but this is Jacob sort of giving his sons cautionary wisdom about if they keep on the road that they're on, this is what they can expect. Shimon and Levi are violent. He's saying this is not going to go well for you. Reuben already usurped his father's place. He's counseling his sons without being explicit to be thinking of humility and to appreciate opportunity. Judah already stands as the apple of his eye, and he's telling Judah, you've got a lot to look forward to if you maintain the kind of behavior that's led to your position in life at this point. Any reactions or thoughts that occur to you that you want to put out there? Maybe you'd never thought about this text before as an ethical will so much. And you don't have to have responses. Yeah. David said every part of each sentence has a story behind it. I'm repeating for folks at home. I'll give you a microphone when there's something to share. Yeah. And some of it we have background on. Lots of especially the continuing material, we just don't know. We didn't get that part of the story. We can think back to some of what Joseph responded to and the pieces of the story we heard about how they reacted to the jealousy of their little brother and then selling him off into slavery and how they changed along the way and Judah's maturation. We've got little snippets, but you're right. There's tons of material baked in there that would have made more sense to well, at this point, they're grown men who are receiving this comment from their father. And that's a great observation because once you decide who's going to be receiving your ethical will, there will be shorthand that you'll use that is never going to be understood fully by anybody else. And so you can rely on that. I mean, that's sort of a wonderful little technique, a tool. Yeah, Alan.
Was there a specific event that made the timing of this happening now, so to speak, for
in the Torah?
Jacob?
Well, we do have the sense that Jacob knew that his life was coming to an end, and so there we go. Because he was on his deathbed, and it's the last opportunity for him to offer these kinds of comments, he calls his sons over. You're operating on the assumption that he knows I'm not long for this world. And it does happen. It's not common enough. We talked a bit about hospice in the last series. Often people wait too long to bring in hospice, which means by the time everybody is on the same page about this coming close to the end of his life, her life, it's already too late. She's already no longer communicative. It happens too often, not always, but when a family is aware that the end is impending, and they can all be honest about it and open about it and not dancing around the issue, then sometimes people can call loved ones over to them. They can call their son in California and say, I'd really like you to come home and sit with me for a little while, and it's those kinds of conversations that are happening here. We are to imagine that as soon as this conversation ended, Jacob passed shortly after. Right. Yeah, Ed.
When I first saw the passage, it looked like he was foreseeing the future. But on second thought, he was really saying that he didn't like the values of his older sons, or the first three that he mentioned, and that this was going to do them no good unless they changed their ways. It's a lesson.
Yeah. Yeah, that's nicely said. And to be fair, the pshat of the text, the very simple meaning is what you said first, that he's just making predictions. He's saying, almost like prophecy, this is what's going to happen. For our purposes, as we delve into what it's like for this man to speak to his children, we're expanding it to what you said second, which is, I'm giving you some warnings here. It's not a foregone conclusion. It's not written yet. And so, yeah, we can expand it into that energy of wisdom that can be heard or ignored. Sometimes I've asked people, what would you say to your 15-year-old self if you could? And then the follow-up question is, would you have heard or heeded yourself at 15? If you could go back now and say what you need to yourself, could you have heard it, your 15-year-old self? And most people usually say, no, I needed to make the mistakes. I needed to walk the path in order to get to this point. Yeah, Martha.
It sounds a little critical.
Yeah.
Instead of sharing I guess his wisdom is that he sees what's going to happen to them if they behave that way. But I don't think if I were writing something to my son that he would receive it well if it were critical.
No, I'm really glad you put your finger on that. Here's my suspicion that Jacob's sons knew their father well. And this was probably about as loving as that man got. He did have a soft spot for Joseph, but think about how he treated his first wife, Leah. There was no love lost there. He had concubines that he never even named, really. I mean, we know who they are, but this is not a man who was warm and fuzzy. And my guess is his sons probably went, yeah, that tracks. That's pretty much who Dad was. I think you're probably exactly right, Martha. This is not likely the tone. Well, I know this isn't the tone I would take. I'm thinking about those of you I know in the room with us, and I don't suspect it's the tone you would take either. It's just not how we think about communication with our children. On the other hand, he was a prophet, and so he's got prophecy to share. So, be thinking about the tone as well. That's exactly right. Let's take a look at a different tone. The next text that I'm going to show you is from the book of Deuteronomy, which is by and large itself one long ethical will. Deuteronomy, which means in I guess the Latin root, the second telling, deuteronomy, is a recap or a retelling of pretty much the basics of the first 4 books of the Torah. So in this 5th book, it's Moses going back through everything and delivering final statements. And then at the very end of the book, he dies. So similarly, there's a sense that he's got to get this out before it's too late. And let's hold on to that way of thinking for just a moment. But here in Deuteronomy, he says, the text says, Moses came with Yehoshua ben Nun and spoke all the words of this song in the hearing of the people. And when Moses finished reciting all these words to all Israel, he said to them, take to heart all the words that I have solemnly declared to you this day, so that you may command your children to obey carefully all the words of this law. They are not just idle words for you. They are your life. By them, you will live long in the land that you are crossing the Jordan to possess. So this has a very different feel to it. Here, he recognizes that as an old man, he's earned a lot of respect, but he also has pretty much faded from the limelight, so to speak. In fact, in the Mishnah, when it goes through each decade of a man's life, and sorry, it is men in the text, when you get to your 100 year, that I guess it's the 11th decade, whatever, it says it is as if you are dead and gone from the world. So Moses is 120, and he's trying to grab their attention one more time. They're about ready to cross the Jordan River. They're still over in what is today Jordan. They know the promised land is right over there, and Moses is not going with them. So he's saying, listen to me, everyone. This is important. And you can feel the desperation. He's saying, these aren't just idle words. You know, what I'm telling you, it's important. He's trying to find some way to transmit this knowledge before it's too late. And as we contemplate the idea of creating our own ethical will, I mean, I remember struggling with it my first go around. How do I say what I want to say in a way that will be receivable and usable? And I don't know what the answer is. Some of you who are more gifted writers than I will find your way of doing so. And others, well, we'll just wrestle with it, and we'll hope to make an impact here. I'm going to show you one more quick text, and then I'll take down the texts for a while, and we'll talk about it. So this is from the book of Proverbs, or Mishle. And it's a little note. My son, give me your heart and your eyes. Let them keep to my ways. So this is an old man who believes that he has lived the life that his son should live. You know, now, this is not modern parenting to say, do what I did and you'll be fine. You know, most of us say we prep our kids with all the resources they need to live their own lives. And we want them to, you know, not necessarily follow exactly like we do. And then we criticize when they don't do what we did. But here's a man who's trying to get his son's attention to say, I've got something to show you. Just think to yourself, basically, what would dad do? Well, that's an interesting suggestion to put a lot of value on who you are, because I think that one of the natures of parenting is to try to transmit the best of ourselves and to leave as much of the other stuff out as possible. So if you did a good job, then every time your kid says to him or herself, what would mom say? Or what would dad do? Then theoretically, that should work really well, right? This author thought so. Supposedly that was King Solomon, but who knows? All right. So what thoughts or observations might you like to share?
I feel like any of these statements or readings can be translated by the reader in a lot of different ways. So you write it with the intention of your child reading it and getting out of it what you hope they will, but you're not really sure because they're going to interpret it in their own mind at whatever stage of life they're in. And they may read it 20 years later and interpret it differently.
Yeah. And that is, you know, part of the inherent nature of putting a text out there. As soon as you write it down and click send or print or whatever version we're talking about, it is no longer entirely yours. Well, how does that make you feel?
I think it's just something you have to keep in mind as you're writing, that you may intend one thing and the person reading it takes it another way.
Mhm.
So it's a little bit subject to their own vision and their, like I said, stage of life or state of mind or whatever.
Yeah.
That would be going through my mind as I was writing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it would also be interesting to think about how permanent is the version that you've sent. I saw once, I've only seen it once. I was in a cemetery in Michigan, actually, and on the back of the headstone, the front was a standard headstone. On the back of the headstone was a web URL, a web address, and it was a permanent website that the individual had created before he or she died. I did follow it because I was curious. And it was like a lasting digital legacy online, which is, you know, I guess pretty permanent. But if you had, and there's all kinds of ways, we'll talk about mechanisms for delivery and your intent behind it in a few minutes, actually. But there's all kinds of ways to keep it a living document, a fresh document. And then too, you know, I wrote this this first draft for my son, I don't know, 8 years ago or so. My daughter was an infant at that point. And so I didn't even really, this is just between us, right? I didn't even really have her in mind. You know, I didn't even know who this human was. But my son, I had a relationship with. And so I wrote it for him. And now as I went back and read it, yeah, I'd write it a little differently. And I might do just that. So are you writing it for a person as they are today? Or is it possible to write a document that stands the test of time? I don't know. You know, I think we've already seen in some ways that the document of the Torah does not necessarily stand the test of time without a whole lot of interpretation and discussion. Yeah.
Should I grab that? So we're talking about writing these for our children, but what about our grandchildren? I mean, do you write just for one person, or could it be my daughter, my you know?
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah. So that's a great question, Diane. Well, let's talk about that for a few moments now. These, as I said, can take lots of different forms and serve lots of different purposes. So you can write for anyone you want. You can write an ethical will for your long dead parents. You can write to your partner who may or may not predecease you. You can write to your children or your as yet unborn grandchildren. You can write to yourself. You can write to a best friend if you don't have children. You can write for a blog that goes out there into the blogosphere and is for everybody and nobody. So the flexibility of this really is one of the early elements of the process, a process of discernment. Well, who is the intended audience? Grandchildren? Absolutely. That's a perfect way to go about it. Yeah, they're all good ways. Yeah. So that kind of takes the shape of what Jacob was doing. We read it as one continuous text and he addresses each one differently. I was reading one this afternoon, and he started with his sons, and then after giving all the wonderful, this is from 1,000 years ago, after giving all this wonderful, beautiful material to his sons, he did have a sentence for his daughters, which was lovely. But yeah, you can bundle it for sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Evgen, here.
Argument, I probably would say that for my children to read it in different stages of their lives. So what I'm going to say to you now, when you're 20 years old, your interpretation would be different when you're 40 or when you're 60. So that would be something I probably would PS
Yeah.
at the end.
Yeah, not just that. You can write it and seal it in different envelopes, written on the outside, not to be opened until you turn 60. And then another consideration is, do you want to deliver this material now while you're still alive? Or is this something that you give to the rabbi to keep in my study until you die? And I'm sitting with your family members, at your funeral intake, and I say, look, Dad wanted you to have this. He gave it to me way back in 2024. And now that it's 2053, that good enough for everyone? Okay. Now I have this this letter that he wrote to you, and it was to be given today. Or you find some other way to give it to your best friend and say, if I should die before you do, I want you to send this to my kids, my grandkids, my partner, whatever. Great. Any questions or observations from home? Okay. Wow. Yeah, with my keep on, you can hardly see my bald spot as much. Yeah. I was exercising with Larry Stujenki the other day, and in the gym, they've got mirrors everywhere. And if you look at this mirror, it bounces 16 times around the room, and I got this really good look at my bald spot. And I never did that exercise again. Okay. So I'm going to show you another example. This one is, it's a little more playful, I guess. Not playful. That's not the right expression. Some of you will be familiar with, with this this piece. Where's my share screen? There we go. Let's see here. So this is a professor, oops, I gotta move this over, named Randy Pausch. There we go. Anybody familiar with that name? He was, I gotta rewind it. Oh, hold on a second. Stop share. Let me try one more time, see if I can share that. He was a professor at Carnegie Mellon and was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And there is a tradition known as the last lecture tradition. And so sometimes as academics retire, they are invited to give their last lecture. This guy took it a little further and said, I actually know that I'm going to be dead in, a couple of months. And so here's my last lecture, and it's got a little bit more oomph to it. Oprah Winfrey picked it up and went viral before the days of viral memes. And he made his circuit. There's I think like a TED Talk version of it, but it was long before TED. And so I just wanted to show you a few minutes of how he phrases that. Let's see, is this working? Anybody? No. Why did that not work? Thank you for patience. Still at home, they're not seeing it. So I want to try to help them see. One more time, I'm going to try. There we go. They said, oh, good. Okay. So let me just rewind here a little bit. Can you hear that at home?
I'm glad to be here today. Hell, I'm glad to be anywhere today. President Cohen asked me to come and give the charge to the graduates. I assure you it's nothing compared to the charge you have just given me. This is an incredible place. I've seen it through so many lenses. I saw it when I was a graduate student that didn't get admitted, and then somebody invited me back and said, okay, we'll change our mind. And I saw it as a place that hired me back to be on the faculty many years later, and then gave me the chance to do what anybody wants to do, which is follow their passion, follow their heart, and do the things they're excited about. And the great thing about this university, unlike almost the other ones I know of, is that nobody gets in your way when you try to do it. And that's just fantastic. And to the degree that a human being can love an institution, I love this place. And I love all of the people, and I'm very grateful to Jerry Cohen and everyone else for all the kindness that have been shown me. Last August, I was told that in all likelihood I had 3 to 6 months left to live. I'm on month 9 now, and I'm not going to get down and do any push-ups. But there will be a short pickup basketball game later. Somebody said to me, in light of those numbers, wow, so you're really beating the Grim Reaper. And what I said without even thinking about is that we don't beat the Reaper by living longer. We beat the Reaper by living well and living fully. For the Reaper will come for all of us. The question is, what do we do between the time we're born and the time he shows up? Because when he shows up, it's too late to do all the things that you're always going to kind of get around to. So I think the only advice I can give you on how to live your life well is, first off, remember, it's a cliche, but I love cliches. It is not the things we do in life that we regret on our deathbed. It is the things we do not. Because I assure you, I've done a lot of really stupid things, and none of them bother me. All the mistakes and all the dopey things and all the times I was embarrassed, they don't matter. What matters is that I can kind of look back and say, pretty much any time I got a chance to do something cool, I tried to grab for it. And that's where my solace comes from. The second thing that I would add to that, and I didn't coordinate on the subject of this word, but I think it's the right word that comes up, is passion. And you will need to find your passion. Many of you have already done it, many of you will later. Many of you may take till your 30s or 40s, but don't give up on finding it, right? Because then all you're doing is waiting for the Reaper. Find your passion and follow it. And if there is anything I have learned in my life, you will not find that passion in things. And you will not find that passion in money. Because the more things and the more money you have, the more you will just look around and use that as the metric, and there will always be someone with more. So your passion must come from the things that fuel you from the inside. And honors and awards are nice things, but only to the extent that they regard the real respect from your peers and to be thought well of by other people that you think even more highly of is a tremendous honor that I've been granted. Find your passion, and in my experience, no matter what you do at work or what you do in official settings, that passion will be grounded in people. And it will be grounded in the relationships you have with people and what they think of you when your time comes. And if you can gain the respect of those around you and the passion and true love, and I've said this before, but I waited till 39 to get married because I had to wait that long to find someone where her happiness was more important than mine. And if nothing else, I hope that all of you can find that kind of passion and that kind of love in your life. Thank you.
He's giving us his ethical will here. His actual last lecture, this was the commencement speech he did. I found the lecture, but it was too lengthy to really utilize for our purposes. Maybe I'll put in the link for the email after class tonight for anyone who wants to watch the whole thing. It's better constructed. It's a little bit more cohesive. He says, if I had to summarize my whole last lecture into 3 words, it would be tell the truth. And he said, if I had a 4th word, it would be tell the truth always. Like, he's refining himself down to the essence. And whether, regardless of how you feel about his material, you understand the urgency that comes with it. I don't have much longer to get this out to you. And in some ways, it's the effort of every commencement address is to get the attention of these young graduates as they head out into the world and somehow inspire them. So it's a ripe moment. You've got all the context set up, but when you deliver your ethical will to your loved one, if you can get their attention and say, please understand what this is, then you have the opportunity for some real attention. By the way, his message here is also summarized in Psalm 90, where it says, the span of a life is 80 years and 10, or given strength, 80 years. But the best of those years have trouble and sorrow. Teach me, therefore, so to live that I may attain a heart of wisdom. He's saying it's not about how long it takes for the reaper to find you, but it's what you do with the life. Life is life. It's going to be up and down. It's going to be, but as long as you make the most of it, then it doesn't matter whether you get 70 years or 80 years or 23 years. It doesn't matter. That's not the point. So I love the way he framed that. Any thoughts, observations, questions? Okay. I'm going to. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to now transition into the beginning of our homework. Okay. The idea here is that we have 2 interims between our sessions, 3 sessions. So there's 2 weeks in between. This first week in between is about brainstorming. It's about starting the process of refining or getting yourself into that space where you get what you want out onto a page. So I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions, and these will be in the email as well. Actually, no, they're not an email, but okay. So I'm going to put this up on the screen too. That's not what okay. So this week in between tonight and next, you're going to be starting to just jot down notes or whatever your process is for holding on to ideas. And the kinds of questions you might think about include sentences that start with, these were the formative events of my life. You could right now on one foot name 1 or 2 things that really changed the course of your life. They're different for all of us. Right off the top of my head, 3 come to mind. This is not a hard question for a person to answer. We're all well acquainted with that, but we don't stop to realize that our kids or our grandkids probably are not as familiar with this as you are. And it might be nice for them to understand what were the biggest things that made you who you are. Here's another one. This is the world from which I came. You know, we all talk about how in the old days we had to pick up the phone and hold it up to our ear and there was a cord attached to the wall. You know, kids hear about how it was snowing and walk to school uphill both directions. We laugh about that. But to some extent, that's the kind of thing that helps them understand who you are without making it into a joke or something to be, you know, to receive an eye roll. It's actually really powerful if you can find an authentic way to help your grandkids understand what was it like to grow up where you did, when you did, as you did. Here's another one. These are some of the most important lessons that I've learned in my life. You know, I think I've thought about this a lot. You know, I don't know, maybe it's a risk of the profession, but in my mind, I often think, well, you know, when I'm reflecting on my parents' lives, what am I going to be saying, you know, as a eulogy or something? And I can rattle right off the important lessons that my parents held on to and transmitted to me and my sister. You know, this often becomes some of those repeated sentences. You can probably think about your own parents or your grandparents. There were things that they said that summarize their core truths. These are the people who influenced me most. You know, we are who we are because of the people we've interacted with and some DNA. But otherwise, for the most part, it's the, you know, the influential individuals. These are some of the favorite possessions that I want you to have. And these are the stories that explain what makes these things so precious to me. You know, actually, I'm curious, does anybody, I'll just pause here and see, does anybody have an example that jumps to mind of a precious item that you're looking forward to passing on, and maybe, I keep losing my pointer. Oh, there it is. Anybody looking forward to bequeathing some sort of object that has a good story that you'll give us a sentence or two about now? Is there a pocket watch or a kiddish cup or, yeah, David, what are you thinking? The mic there.
So there's a candelabra from the early 1800s, a 4-arm silver candelabra that came from Leipzig in Germany from the early 1800s, and it's gone through 3 generations. That's now sitting in our home. It's delicate. The style of it was perfect for the 1800s, and it's there. It's sitting, and it will belong to one of my kids one day, hopefully. There were 2 candelabras. One of them was stolen during the Nazi period, and another one continued.
This one belonged to the original Samuel
Fisher, right.
And our son is Samuel Fisher.
Wow.
So
Right.
it was given to him. It wasn't given to us.
Correct.
It was given to him,
Ah.
but sits in our attic until
Oh,
he
wow.
can appreciate it.
Uh-huh.
So it's from one Sam to the other.
Wow. You said early 1800s. That's got to be more than 3 generations of the family.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
many, many generations.
Mhm,
Yeah.
you're right.
Wow.
Mhm.
And will Samuel appreciate it? So
It's gonna
He
go
he
to
might be
Samuel.
when he's 60.
yeah, he might when he's 60, right? And when he has a grandson who's named Samuel or something like that. I was at a wedding this past weekend, and I was chatting with the mother of the, let's say, groom. I think mother of the groom. And I was telling her how in prepping for a wedding, something I'll say to the couple pretty much every time is, you're under the misconception that this is your wedding. But it's not. This is actually everybody else's wedding. That when we're going through the process of getting married, that moment is so overwhelming. And it's about creating something for the generations that people don't appreciate weddings until they're watching their kids get married. And she said, that is so correct. She's like, I couldn't believe how much I enjoyed today. I hardly remember my own wedding. And I think that what you said is actually right on. You know, when Samuel is 60, he may have a better ability to relate to this kind of nostalgia. And part of what a question like this could do is to slow you down and to make you think, is there anything that I could add to the story you told that might grab his attention differently, that might speak in terms that in which the delivery finds an ear sooner than 60? That's a beautiful example. Anyone home got an example? Okay. Let me go back to a few more questions. There's some really good ones. Okay. These are the people in our family, and these are the causes for which I would like you to feel a sense of responsibility. So this is sort of like that verse from Michelet, where he says, just do what I did, follow in my footsteps, and you'll be good. But this is, you know, for Julie and me, for example, I'm thinking, could Amitai and Neely at this, I mean, they're 13 and 10, so I'll give them a little bit of a pass, but how clear would they be on the causes that are deeply important to Julie and me? Some of them I think would jump right to mind for them, but it'd be nice to explain why Israel Cancer Research Fund is at the top of our giving behavior, or Jewish Family Service, you know, to make sure they understand. You know, I want them to know that their grandfather was the president of Jewish Family Service, that was something that Ima grew up watching, and that's, you know, that's part of why we feel so powerfully about this. So for you to, number one, walk the walk. You know, you can't bullshit your kids or your grandkids or whoever's receiving this thing. They know you. You know, no one wants to read a document and think, wait a second, who is this really describing? Because it's not my father. So once you've walked the walk, then being able to help them see it, again, to package it, to put a frame around you as a whole being, may help them kind of articulate what they always knew, but never stopped to think about in that way. This may speak to some more than others. What are some of the scriptural passages that have meant the most to me? You know, I can rattle off the ones I love most, and it would help if I did that in my document. That would help my kids, again, frame my spirituality, my way of being to some extent, on our sacred texts. Here's a few more. These are the mistakes that I regret having made the most in my life, and that I hope you will not repeat. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, that's where you get to say, you know, you get to describe why you serve this particular dish at Passover every year, because your grandmother used to do it. And they've probably heard you say it year after year after year, and they may already be continuing that dish. But how lovely to be able to say to their grandkids, your great, great, great grandmother used to, you know, and you have a little bit of a role in being able to help them tell that story. Yeah, traditions is a great way to personalize this. Way more relevant. Thank you. So sometimes, you know, an ethical will is about trying to help them avoid the pitfalls that you yourself made. Now, this is interesting because I think that, Evgen, when you were reflecting on how it's going to be read differently at different ages, this speaks to me in that respect, because how interesting would it be for us to read as mature adults about our parents' mistakes? And at this stage in life, you know, each of us are in different stages and we've each had different stories. To get that information now would be so different than to get it when we were 20. You know, when we're 20, our parents really still don't have much to teach us. Someone said to me, oh, I heard her say actually to another parent about their teen. They said, your teen, when your kid was growing up, you were really, really smart. And now you're really, really stupid. But don't worry, you'll be really, really smart again someday. So, you know, a 20-year-old still thinks the parents are pretty dumb. When they get to be 25, they start to realize, oh, actually, there are some things that they know. And when they're 60, they see their parents totally differently. So, you know, to go back and read, you're not going to keep anybody from making their mistakes. It's just not how it works. But to help them understand that they and their own mistakes are part of what make them human, just like their mother was human and made her mistakes, that's powerful. You know, that's a connection to your parents that, or to whoever wrote this for you, that you might not have had otherwise. This is my definition of true success. You know, that might be something you'd like to say to your kids. You know, Jacob in the Torah had a notion of what success looks like. I have a very different notion of success. So I would say it very differently to my kids. This is how I feel as I look back over my life. Might be interesting. I'd love to hear my dad describe this. You know, what does he feel like when he looks back over his life? I look at his life and I think one thing, it's got to be somewhat different when he articulates it himself. This is powerful. And I think the next one too. I would like to ask your forgiveness for, finish the sentence. You know, and think about the difference too between whether your recipient receives this while you're still around versus after you're gone. You know, picture them sitting at the Shiva and reading this, or at the yahrzeit 1 year after you're gone, reading this and hearing your voice from beyond the grave saying, I want to ask you to forgive me for, well, you know what. And then, you know, sometimes the second part might also be appropriate. If you know that there's this unspoken issue that was never resolved, still isn't resolved today, you might not be able to say to the addressee right now, I forgive you for this. That might be too hard right now. But to hear it beyond the grave, I forgive you. You can change a life with that. I want you to know how much I love you and how grateful I am to you. You know, those are just good, heartfelt, beautiful words that are never wasted, especially if you're in a family that doesn't say those words all that much. You know, lots of families don't say, I love you all the time. And so if that's one of your families, to make sure they know that they are loved, man. So now I just want to kind of pause and see, you know, what are these, are these the kinds of things that that you were thinking would be on the list of starter questions? Is this the kind of stuff that occurred to you as the material that might be in an ethical will? Yes. Yep.
So you mentioned a couple of times the option or opportunity to provide this will when your kids are, when you're still around, or waiting until you're not around. And I hadn't given it much thought, but there are huge implications with that. Some good, I can think only good ones in a certain sense. Do you have an opinion or ways of thinking about the pros and cons of something like that?
Well, I mean, the con of waiting until you're gone is that you're almost certainly going to elicit in your reader the desire to respond. And you know, you'll have to make sure you mention at the end of your ethical will that Temple Sinai has a wind phone down below, and they can come pick up the phone and talk to you after you're gone. But other than that, you know, if there is unresolved stuff that you're addressing there and you're saying something powerful, I suppose I could imagine scenarios where the reader could be upset that, you know, you're only saying this to me now. Why couldn't you say this when we were when we were still together, when I could have looked you in the eye. But that's only in certain situations, for the most part. I mean, I still kind of like what Evgen was hinting at, which is there could be different additions or elements that come along the way. One could be, that you give it to them now, and then you also have a letter to be addressed after you die. Yeah. What were some of the advantages? I'm curious to see how you would articulate the pros.
So that you know that they know now.
Hmm.
And there's an opportunity for dialogue.
Yeah. Are there pros in your mind to waiting until you're gone?
Could there be a degree of embarrassment
Mhm.
on both sides?
Mhm.
No, not many.
Yeah.
No.
Another pro for waiting until you're gone is I'm going to call it the romance of it. Maybe drama is another word that could go along with it. There is something spectacular about being torn apart in the midst of a loss of a loved one, a significant loved one, and then getting a completely unexpected communique and having the opportunity to interact in that way. Just the emotional wholeness of that is, I don't know, it's kind of appealing to me in a way. It's like a scene out of a movie or something. Yeah. What's that? Yeah, there's something cool about that. Evgen?
I think all of these statements that we made here, all throughout our lives, when we're with children or friends, and wherever I would prefer with my children, not necessarily with my friends, to little bits of here and there to talk to them about it and explain to them what's important to me, what's my passion, and what was important things that in my life happened, and just like in nice stories, like as you bond with them. But after you go on and you answer and put it's like a summary at the end of all these things that I've been saying. Here's the summary, here's the whole thing. Like that ends, full stop.
Yeah, that's great. And in fact, I don't know if I have it still up or not. No, it looks like it's not still open. In the will that I wrote to my son that I've referenced now far too many times, I apologize. Towards the bottom, I said, if I've done my job, then none of this should be new to you. And it's acknowledging, I think, what you were getting at, which is that this should be, or is most likely material that pretty familiar with, they've heard before. And yet something about hearing it in this way at this time changes it all over again. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, right. It's good to have that lasting iteration of it. Exactly. Yeah, Tamara.
You asked if these questions are what we expected. This is exactly what I expected. And that first example that you had shown of an ethical will was so different that I guess I think of these kind of letters, whether you give them while you're still alive or after you die, is partly kind of like I think of a Shiva, that the tradition is really to help the people left alive to carry on for their next phase. That I think you're writing this letter, yes, to pass on thoughts you have for the person, but also in a sense to buoy them up and give them the strength to keep going with the loss of you and whatever you meant in their life.
I really like the way you said that. And I'll only add that is one really valid way of thinking of this. It's not the only way. Helping them cope and heal and get through a desperately difficult chapter may be one of the ways that this thing functions, but not everybody who tackles the task will do it for the same reasons, and that's fine too. And I agree. The only reason I showed you those early biblical versions was to just couch the practice of this in a lengthy tradition. I maybe after class tonight, when I email you some other stuff, I'll include a few other examples for anyone who has nothing better to do. I've got one from the 1500s that's it's quite remarkable. Another from the I think it was from around the year 1000, and they're more like what I think you and I both had in mind, Tamara, when we hear the concept, not what Jacob did. Okay. So, yeah, I'll mention this too. One other thing which you can include in this, but it would be only in certain types of format and only in the right situation. This could also be the kind of document that could include wishes for your end of life. You can include in here instructions about how you'd like to end your life, where you'd like to be, what you most certainly want to avoid. This can include instructions about your funeral if you have specific ideas. And even if you don't have specific needs or images in your mind, when you articulate your wishes, even if you don't care that much, it's an enormous burden off the shoulders of your loved ones. You know, I try not to put this burden on people, but when we ask questions like, you know, is there anything in the service, in the funeral service, that you want or don't want? You know, you can see they're already exhausted, they're already emotional, and they're trying to think, I don't know, what would mom have wanted? Or, you know, if you articulate where you want to be or what kind of casket you want, sometimes some people include those kinds of details in an ethical will, just to help give instruction to their family members. You can also just come meet with me and tell me what you want. I have a file of meetings with people who do just that, who come and talk to me about all their wishes so that their kids don't have to worry about it. I love when people do that. So that is sometimes included. Okay, so how are we doing on? Okay, so we're gonna finish. It looks like a few minutes early tonight. Next week, I'm going to give a little time for sharing, because it's likely that you'll have, you know, if you use any of these starter questions or if they stimulated ideas to get you going in other ways, it is likely that you're going to find something in the process that you just really enjoyed getting out. And so, you know, there may be a few of you who want to share a little something, just like Amy and David did on the candelabra. So there'll be a little time for sharing. And then we're going to talk about the process of transforming your notes. All you're doing now are snippets. They're just little vignettes, little ideas, no organization, you know, almost stream of consciousness this week. Just get everything out onto the page. I'm going to send, I think the worksheet is this week. But one of the first questions is, excuse me, are there any things that you know right off the bat need to be in there? You know, start with that. You know, I need to tell the story about how our family, you know, survived the Holocaust, or I need to tell the story about the time that, you know, my grandmother dropped the turkey at Thanksgiving, or I need to tell the story about my bar mitzvah. I don't know what it is. You know what it is. So if there are elements that you need to get in there, if there are, I was going to say sayings, but that's not quite the right word. If there are isms, you know, if there are Evgenisms that you need to get in there, something your family knows you always say, and you want to explain why you always say it, why it's so important. You know, this week it's about just collecting lots of information. Next week, we're going to talk about the steps to bring it together into a deliverable. And there are lots probably lots more ways to go about it than you might already be thinking. And we'll play with some of those next week. And then the interim between that second session and the third session is to create something, maybe getting close to a draft, or even, you know, more if you're a good, quick, efficient writer. And some of you may choose to share some of what you wrote when we're together in the third session. All right. Any last thoughts or questions? In that case, thanks everybody. I'll send you some stuff electronically, and all these things will be there. Have a great night, everyone at home. Thank you. Good night. Oh, I'll wave to you this way.
Thank you.